The postilions lashed towards the sea, and the horses strove in the depth of sand, and the serving men cocked their blunderbusses and cowered away behind them. But the lady stood up in the carriage bravely, and neither screamed nor spoke, but hid her son behind her. Meanwhile the drivers drove into the sea, till the leading horses were swimming. But before the waves came into the coach, a score of fierce men were round it. They cursed the postilions for mad cowards, and cut the traces, and seized the wheel horses, all wild with dismay in the wet and the dark. Then, while the carriage was heeling over, and well nigh upset in the water, the lady exclaimed, "I know that man! He is our ancient enemy!" And Benita, foreseeing that all their boxes would be turned inside out or carried away, snatched the most valuable of the jewels, a magnificent necklace of diamonds, and cast it over the little girl's head, and buried it under her travelling cloak, hoping to save it. Then a great wave, crested with foam, rolled in, and the coach was thrown on its side, and the sea rushed in at the top and the windows, upon shrieking and clashing and fainting away. What followed Benita knew not, as one might well suppose, herself being stunned by a blow on the head, beside being palsied with terror. "See, I have the mark now," she said, "where the jamb of the door came down on me." But when she recovered her senses, she found herself lying upon the sand, the robbers were out of sight, and one of the serving men was bathing her forehead with sea water. For this she rated him well, having taken already too much of that article, and then she arose and ran to her mistress, who was sitting upright on a little rock, with her dead boy's face to her bosom, sometimes gazing upon him, and sometimes questing round for the other one. Although there were torches and links around, and she looked at her child by the light of them, no one dared to approach the lady, or speak, or try to help her. Each man whispered his fellow to go, but each hung back himself, and muttered that it was too awful to meddle with. And there she would have sat all night, with the fine little fellow stone dead in her arms, and her tearless eyes dwelling upon him, and her heart but not her mind thinking, only that the Italian women stole up softly to her side and whispered, "It is the will of God." "So it always seems to be," were all the words the mother answered. And then she fell on Benita's neck, and the men were ashamed to be near her weeping, and a sailor lay down and bellowed. Surely these men are the best. Before the light of the morning came along the tide to watch it, my lady had met her husband. They took her into the town that night, but not to her own castle, and so the power of womanhood, which is itself maternity, came over swiftly upon her. The lady, whom all people loved, though at certain times particular, lies in Watchet little churchyard, with son and heir at her right hand, and a little babe, of sex unknown, sleeping on her bosom. "This is a miserable tale," said Jeremy Stickles brightly. "Hand me over the schnapps, my boy. What fools we are to spoil our eyes for other people's troubles! Enough of our own to keep them clean, although we were all chimney sweeps. There is nothing like good Hollands, when a man becomes too sensitive. Restore the action of the glands. That is my rule, after weeping. Let me make you another, John. You are quite low-spirited." But although Master Jeremy carried on so, as became his manhood, and laughed at the sailor's bellowing, bless his heart, I knew as well that tears were in his brave keen eyes, as if I had dared to look for them, or to show mine own. "And what was the lady's name?" I asked, "and what became of the little girl? And why did the woman stay there?" "Well," cried Jeremy Stickles, only too glad to be cheerful again, "talk of a woman after that. As we used to say at school, who dragged whom, how many times, in what manner, round the wall of what? But to begin, last first, my John, as becomes a woman, Benita stayed in that blessed place, because she could not get away from it. The Doones, if Doones indeed they were, about which you of course know best, took every stiver out of the carriage, wet or dry they took it, and Benita could never get her wages, for the whole affair is in chancery, and they have appointed a receiver." "Whew!" said I, knowing something of London, and sorry for Benita's chance. So the poor thing was compelled to drop all thought of Apulia, and settle down on the brink of Exmoor, where you get all its evils without the good to balance them. She married a man who turned a wheel for making the blue watchet wear, partly because he could give her a house, and partly because he proved himself a good soul towards my lady. There they are, and have 3 children, and there you may go and visit them. I understand all that, Jeremy, though you do tell things too quickly, and I would rather have John Fry's style, for he leaves one time for his words to melt. Now for my second question, what became of the little maid? "You great oaf!" cried Jeremy Stickles. "You are rather more likely to know, I should think, than any one else in all the kingdoms." "If I knew, I should not ask you. Jeremy Stickles, do try to be neither conceited nor thick-headed." "I will when you are neither," answered Master Jeremy. "But you occupy all the room, John. No one else can get in with you there." "Very well, then, let me out. Take me down in both ways." "If ever you were taken down, you must have your double joints ready now. And yet in other ways you will be as proud and set up as Lucifer. As certain sure as I stand here, that little maid is Lorna Doone." End of chapter 53. Recording by Michelle Harris.